Hey everybody, this is Liquid Quick, and this is a deck tech before playing a league with a Pauper Affinity. So my list is pretty standard, but I wanted to go through some of the cards in this list so that you can understand how this deck plays and what some of the goals are. So the way Affinity works is that you are playing an artifact-based deck that takes advantage of the mechanic Affinity. Affinity makes things less expensive the more of a type that you have. So there was affinity for islands, there's affinity for mountains and swamps, but there's then also affinity for artifacts. So this spell, for example, is a 7 mana 4/4 Mirror Enforcer. It's not particularly powerful on its base, but you'll see that it costs one less for each artifact you control. Awesome. Uh, how we can abuse that then is through these lands here, which are all artifacts. So they don't just tap for 1 mana, like a typical land does in the case of Mirror Enforcer. They actually are worth 2. So you have 3 of these lands out plus any other artifact, and now this is a 3 mana 4/4, which is considerably closer to rate or above rate. It is not uncommon to have this cost 2 or 1 or even 0, and free 4/4s are very powerful. We also have Frogmite, which is a cheaper affinity for artifacts spell. It's a 2/2 for 4, which often is played for 1 or 0 mana on the second turn of the game. Our other affinity card, we only have one other card that actually says affinity on it, is one of our draw spells, Thoughtcast. Generally, this is going to be a 1 mana draw 2. Occasionally, it's a 2 mana draw 2. It never is a 3 mana draw 2. There's just no way for you to produce 3 mana without having the ability to play this for 2. So Thoughtcast is again a very powerful spell. Some of our other creatures that have affinity-like qualities, Gearseeker's Serpent doesn't have the word affinity on it, but it essentially has affinity. This just came from a set that did not have affinity. So what you're getting in Gearseeker's Serpent is a 2 mana blue 5/6 as early as turn 3, which is, again, is very powerful. Our other kind of beater creature is Carapace Forger. It's a 2 mana 2/2, but with Metalcraft it becomes a 4/4. So again, you can see how having these artifact lands makes it really powerful. You're often going to be able to make this a 2 mana 4/4 on turn 2 with 2 lands and any of these 1-drops that you can find, which is a pretty common play pattern. Our other big kind of finisher, which gives us kind of a combo aspect to our deck, is Atog. Atog, which lets you sacrifice an artifact to get +2/+2 until end of turn, is a really powerful creature. It's kind of an unassuming 1/2 until you kill your opponent with it. You can do that a number of ways. One is just by attacking with it and them not having enough blockers or not having any blockers. But the common way is to combo it with either Fling or Team or Battle Rage. So Fling reads sacrifice a creature, or additional cost to cast the spell sacrifice a creature. Fling deals damage equal to sacrifice creature's power to any target. So that's going to almost always be to opponent's face. If you sacrificed your board, it's not uncommon to do 10 to 20 to 25 damage with Atog through a Fling. The other way to do that is through combat with Team or Battle Rage. It requires significantly less artifacts, and you can sacrifice 4 or 5 artifacts to make this a 9/10 or a 10/11, or sorry, 9/10 or an 11/12 to deal 18 or 22 damage, depending on what you need with Atog to kill your opponent using Team or Battle Rage. So then, what are our engine cards? How do we make this work? How do we kind of power these out? Well, we've got a bunch of artifacts that are going to let us do that. We've got Chromatic Star, which is a 1 mana artifact that lets you sacrifice it, pay 1 and sacrifice to add 1 of any color. It helps with color fixing. As you can see, our mana is a little bit greedy in terms of being able to play all these colored spells. So this is going to let you play your colored spells. It also is a free sacrifice to Atog to make it bigger. You get Ichor Wellspring, which enters the battlefield and you draw a card, and when it's put in a graveyard, you draw a card. So it lets you cycle, adds to your artifact count for Frogmite, Mirror Enforcer, Gearseeker Serpent, Carapace Forger. It also lets you sacrifice it to Atog to draw an extra card. We have Prophetic Prism, which again helps with our color requirements, and draws a card, adds to our artifact count. Kind of runs a big purpose here. We play Flare Husk as another creature and a way to enable adding artifacts to the board quickly. And then we also have Springleaf Drum, which is an artifact, so it makes our affinity cards less expensive, is a color fixer, and is an accelerator, so it lets us have some pretty powerful starts. Finally, we've got two other cards that we haven't talked about. So we've got card draw here in Thoughtcast. We also have card draw here in Perilous Research. Perilous Research lets you draw 2 cards and then sacrifice a permanent. It's neat that it's at instant speeds because it gives you a couple of ways to abuse it. The simplest way is to draw 2 cards and then sacrifice a Wellspring, Chromatic Star, the Germ token from Flare Husk if you don't need the 1/1 body anymore, as a way to kind of not lose value, or in some cases gain extra value. Another thing you can do against decks with lots of removal is sometimes save this, and when they target a removal spell at your Carapace Forger or your Frogmite or whatever, you can draw 2 and then sacrifice what was targeted with the removal spell to not lose any value. Finally, the only other card in our deck is the most powerful burn spell in the format when you're playing Affinity. It's Galvanic Blast. Deals 2 damage to any target, but if you have Metalcraft, which means we have 3 more artifacts, it deals 4 damage instead, which we almost always have 3 artifacts by the time you want to cast it, or by the time it's relevant to deal 4 damage. Sometimes you, on turn 1, will cast it as a shock to kill a Delver of Secrets or another 1/1 or 2/2 type creature, but then dealing 4 damage didn't matter when you were trying to kill that type of creature. Anyways, it also is a nice way to finish off the opponent, because dealing 4 or having 2 of them dealing 8 is a big chunk of damage that you can push through really quickly. Out of the sideboard, we've got a number of red cards and then a kind of mismatch of other stuff. We have 1 Ancient Grudge and 1 Gorilla Shaman as a way to deal with artifacts. It's a way to deal with the mirror. We have 3 Pyroblasts for blue decks. We have 3 Kruk Clan Shamans to deal with creatures without flying. So this is going to be good for Affinity, Elves and Stompy and other kind of ground-based creature decks. And we have Electrickery to deal with Delver decks and other small creature decks. We have Feed the Clan for burn. We have Hydroblast for any red deck. We have Relic for any graveyard deck, and we have Rare Revelation for anything that cares about enchantments. So that is our deck tech. You may have heard my baby crying in the background, so I'm going to pause this deck tech right here, and we'll get into some gameplay soon.